It's time for another episode of Tucson Means Business, featuring Tucson's top entrepreneurs and leaders in the business world. And now your host, Mark Bishop.
And welcome to another Tucson Means Business on this another warm day coming into the spring. Well, coming into autumn, really, isn't it? More than anything else. But interesting today. I'll date the podcast, but I was reading today how our president has now got the virus along with his wife. Maybe he should have worn a mask after all, huh? Just goes to show you. But welcome, everybody. This is Tucson Means Business, proudly sponsored by the 49ers Golf and Country Club. And reseating at the moment is looking beautiful if you're driving past at all. Of course, it's not open for golf. Everything's closed down right now. But give it another week or two and everything's back open and back into business, and just use all the rules. And there's great deals as usual. The 49ers Golf and Country Club. And if you go onto the site of Tucson Business RadioX, you can click on the banner, go to their website, and there's a lot of interesting news and useful information for you, okay? And if you're visiting, welcome to Tucson. This show represents businesses that we normally promote in town, big and small in between, because let's face it, they're the lifeblood. This particular show, I've decided to go a little bit different along the medical world. I don't do it too often, so I don't often get the chance. I did have the new Tucson ER and hospital in the other day. That was fascinating, and I took a bit of a tour of that today, which was amazing and very, very modern. But that's another story. But today I have two guests. I have a lady and a gentleman, and the lady is... her role is a crisis mobile team first responder, and she works for a mental health agency. A lot of pressure at the moment on everybody, isn't there, with this darn pandemic? You just don't know what to think every day you get up. Well, we're going to have a bit of a look inside what people are thinking, what they're doing, and what my other guest, Wayne Satten. Wayne he runs a private therapy practice here in Tucson, a very successful gentleman, and he's going to share with us, some of the insights with the pandemic at the moment as well. So I'd like to welcome Caren Jablonsky. Hi, Caren.
Hi there.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mark.
You work in you're the first team responder.
Yes, I am.
And you work in the mental health agency. And Wayne Satten. Hi, Wayne.
Hey there. How are you?
Thanks for taking time out. I know you guys are normally very busy, and you're busy today, but I appreciate the time you've given me. And we're going to look at, it's a most unusual time, isn't it?
Yes.
It is very difficult for a lot of people. Let's find out a little bit about you firstly before we get into the heavy stuff, all right? I want to thank you, which I've done, but your thoughts on how things are out there from your role, from what you see every day and what you do. How are people thinking, Caren? And what aren't they thinking?
Well, Mark, it was very interesting. At the very beginning of the pandemic, we really thought that we would have an influx of calls. What ended up happening was that things really slowed down. It was almost as if everyone was in shock. There's a phenomenon known as fight, flight, or freeze. I think a lot of people were frozen in time. And it has taken several months for the reality to kind of hit. And now, in the last couple of months especially, I would say that we're seeing a lot more substance abuse out in the community.
Really?
Yes.
That's one thing then. So you've worked in the mental health field now for, over 30 years?
Yes.
You've seen a lot of stuff. A specialty in crisis intervention and trauma, informed care. Can you explain these roles for us, please? A little more detail.
Crisis intervention includes an emergency kind of situation where people have been traumatized in a more immediate sense. So I have responded to people who have had a loved one die earlier that morning, such as a mother who found her son dead from an overdose.
Right.
I was called out to assess the mother to see if she needed any type of acute care at that point because of the shock that she was in, having lost her son very suddenly.
Oh, I mean, how do you do that?
As I've come to be in this field over the course of several decades, I've realized how important it is to do self-care. And the whole concept of needing to put on the proverbial oxygen mask first before helping someone else is really true, because I need to keep my tank full on a daily basis in order to most effectively help others.
Well, it's a known fact that, there's X amount of energy you're working with, and if that's drained on you every day, it's amazing how you can keep yours up to be able to help others,
Yes.
It's such a sad thing, and for a mom to lose any child, and for dad's bad enough, but for mom, you're not supposed to bury your children before you, are you?
That's true.
So that's very hard. You also worked with foster children?
Yes, I worked in the foster care field for 18 years up in Phoenix, and I saw a lot of trauma that children had gone through, having been taken out of their family of origin and placed in a home. A lot of children were lucky to be adopted by families that I had placed them with, and those were the very happy stories.
Right.
But a lot of the time, kids were bounced around from one home to another over the course of years.
If I asked you what was the biggest issue that you found with these children, would that be it? Watching them being bounced around?
Yes. I mean, children are traumatized no matter how you look at it as soon as they're separated from their family of origin. So the trauma-informed care is the concept that we look at what has happened to a person as opposed to what is wrong with the person. So that leads to more compassion for the people that we see out in the community.
Right.
We really want to get a feel for what they've gone through and how they've come to the point where they are as we're seeing them.
You must do an enormous amount of training. It's not just a matter of patting somebody on the back, is it?
Well, I'm a proud Wildcat. I received my psychology degree from the U of A, or now U Arizona, and it has come in rather handy. A lot of people get a psychology degree and they end up selling cars. I knew when I was only 13 that I wanted to go into this field of mental health. And it's a calling. That's the only way I can describe it, Mark.
Yeah, I'm at 13 years of age, I know what it is for guys, policemen or a fire engine truck driver or something else, but for women, what do they think of at 13 years of age? And certainly not that. And speaking of children, Wayne Satten, he doesn't deal with children. He has a private therapy practice here in Tucson. Your era of growing up, this was Los Angeles.
Yes.
And that's a pretty rugged city, isn't it?
Did you say rugged?
Rugged, yes.
Not. I had a pretty nice.
You had a nice one.
Yes,
right? A nice
yes.
upbringing.
I
Very good.
grew up in the proverbial suburbs, very nice suburbs of L.A. Through the '60s and '70s.
So it was a good era then, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Right. That's when men were men and women loved them for it, and God knows what else. You went to Philadelphia though to attend college.
Right. I went across the country.
And graduate school, yeah, and high school. What was that like?
Well, it was wonderful. Yeah, I grew up in L.A. right through high school, and then went off to Philadelphia to college and stayed there for grad school, which was wonderful in many ways. It was wonderful to kind of branch out, and at that time for any of us, we're growing up a whole lot, and so to be able to go off to college, it was a great time. Ultimately, at the end of all those years, I wanted to come back west, so I made my way back.
So
nearly to
when
California.
did you come back to Tucson then?
Back in '88. I graduated back in Philadelphia, and then came here to Tucson in '88.
So Wayne, what do you think that led you to be a clinical psychologist? Do you have a calling as well, or what?
I don't think as far back as Caren's, quite honestly. I would say that. In fact, when I finished college, I still was not sure really at all what I wanted to do. I had graduated. I studied philosophy. That was my major in college, and I took that very thoughtfully, very seriously. I loved my major, my studies in philosophy, and in many ways, I ultimately describe going into psychology and psychotherapy in particular as sort of applied philosophy. Because ultimately, even though you introduced us as medical professionals, I never quite, I'm one of those psychologists who doesn't strongly subscribe to the medical model. In other words, I don't really think what I'm doing is being a doctor, treating a patient, and looking for a cure. I think all those words we use, but that isn't really what I think we're doing as psychotherapists.
Okay. So if you were to explain it then, how would you? I'm going to leave that to you. How would you explain it then if it's none of those other things?
Well, I mean, ultimately, it's two people, one with a certain kind of training and understanding all of us as human beings, and trying to also learn the art of helping people self-examine. I mean, that's the core of philosophy of Socrates, know thyself. And I think ultimately psychotherapy is a process of better knowing thyself.
Did you have a favorite like, Freud, Fritz Perls, any of them? Or?
Well, both of those as examples. But I definitely was trained in a more psychoanalytic model. So lots of Freud. And I came to a strong appreciation of Freud and Freudian theory, because I think it's a wonderful theory to understand the depths of our being, of our consciousness. Mm-hmm. So Freud was probably the largest influence. Fritz Perls and the whole mode of therapy that sometimes gets called action-oriented therapy, which Gestalt therapy, Fritz Perls, is one modality. Another big influence, quite honestly, in my evolution as a therapist were my father and stepmother, who in the second careers in their life became therapists, and in particular practiced a type of therapy called psychodrama, which is a very action-oriented therapy.
Yeah, my word. So, well, now we're getting, Caren, where it sort of came from.
Yes.
I mean, a little bit in the family there. You primarily provide individual psychotherapy to adults, right?
That is true.
Okay,
yes.
So, I mean, if I was to ask you, has your business expanded, shall we say, due to the pandemic? What would be the honest answer?
Well, I think the answer is yes. It's hard for me to analyze why. I do find myself busier in my 30-year career, 20 years at least, in more than 20 years in private practice. I am busier than I've ever been. And I don't always know exactly why, but probably a big reason is the pandemic. And so that I get busier both for people who are highly distressed and wanting to have the benefit of some counseling, and on the flip side, clients that I see who are not quite ready to let go of therapy. I think because of all the stress and strain on all of us, I think people who have that supportive therapy are maybe a little slower to let it go in these recent months than maybe in the past.
And Caren, you touched on before, you mentioned too that you've seen an increase in, what was it? I think... was it suicides?
Substance abuse.
Substance abuse?
In particular, alcohol, meth, heroin. Meth is really big here in Tucson. But in the last couple of weeks, we've also been getting more calls for children again. And children, because a lot of them have been home now for the last 7 months, and they're feeling a greater sense of isolation. They're not able to be with their friends in person. It has become really difficult for them over time. I think it's all kind of just really sinking in, and the effects are much more apparent.
When we look at this pandemic, we don't know, do we? It's not in the rearview mirror yet.
No.
We still see another 581 cases, I think today, whatever it was, for Arizona overall. You don't know what to believe in some cases, what you see on the news. What are the major things for people that is causing this stress, do you think? Are they business related? Am I going to survive? Will I keep my job, my home, that type of thing, the material thing? Or is it more that I am locked up? I can't get out. I'm not mixing with anybody. What do you see as most?
You know what, Mark? I think it is a combination. I saw a young woman the other day who was contemplating suicide again after having had an overdose a couple of weeks ago because she had lost her job several months ago now, and her car was just repossessed. She has not been able to get another job. And although she knows in her heart that suicide is not the option, because as I tell people, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary issue, and I think that's really important for people to remember.
That's a nice way of putting it, yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's a factual way of putting it.
It is.
Nothing
Yes.
ever lasts bad forever,
Right. So we are seeing a lot more of those calls, the distress that people are feeling over financial issues and the lack of interaction with friends and loved ones, and the uncertainty of, where's the end game here? There is no end game yet. We have a president, as you said, who has now contracted the virus, and he's supposed to be very well protected. So if it can happen to him,
it can happen
to any one of us.
So it conjures up visions in the mind of this thing could creep under the door at any time. We're not protected, really. No one, can escape from it. Really.
Well,
but it doesn't mean you're going to get it.
Right. But I think it's very important to also remember that being proactive is the best way to feel empowered.
But of course.
So
and not
if we're
everybody...
taking steps on our own to help ourselves remain healthy and protected in whatever way we can, then I think a lot of the fear can be decreased.
Well, not everybody that gets it is going to be very ill, and not everybody that gets it is going to go to hospital.
Absolutely.
And not everybody that gets it is going to die. I mean, but it's still a scary thing.
Yes.
Well, there is that. Just from what you shared, there is that uncertainty. There's a way that anybody who's conscious at this point in the world has to feel a greater ill at ease. We don't have to, or at least we don't want to, hopefully run scared at every moment, because most of us will be free of the virus. And like you just said, many who get it will get through it. We'll get through it okay. We'll get through it okay. But there is just this great uncertainty about how long will it last, and when is it truly safe to open up more vibrantly as a community? What precautions do I want to take, and does that give me certainty of not getting it? Well, there isn't that certainty. It's wise to do whatever we can as reasonable precautions, but that uncertainty is what I'm aware of that creates all of us being a bit more ill at ease. So on top of...
Well, you're right. There's things like you see people with masks on, great, but nothing else. Then I was in somewhere the other day, and this woman was serving food, and she had the down mask down under her nose, which is supposed to be over. So I politely reminded, please put it up, And guess what her answer was? In fairness to her, well, if I put it up, I get so dry, but that my nose bleeds, and I don't want the blood to go all over the sandwiches. Oh. Seriously, right? Then there's another one I saw wearing a shield, one of those face shields. Oh, but all that's wonderful, Mark. Yeah, no, apparently you've still got to wear a mask.
Yes.
Is that right?
I don't know I don't know specifically about that.
Now, you see that answer? That's the fear. Nobody knows exactly certain things, right? You watch this Fauci guy, whatever it is. He's a top man. He's a professional. He knows his stuff.
Yeah.
But he's been saying all along, wear masks. And then you see on the news 50,000 of them gathering at some party or some blessed thing.
Yeah.
Haven't they got a fear of life at all, or a fear of death? I don't understand.
Right.
Well, I think for the young, some of what's gone on for this latest, rise again in the numbers.
Invincibility.
Yeah, is you're right. It's not much of a fear of death, because when you're 18, 20, 25, especially male, you're not thinking about death. So I think a lot of people who are gathering at the parties, like you suggested, are young people who, are to some degree feeling invulnerable.
Bulletproof sort of thing.
Bulletproof sort of, yeah.
You're both in the medical profession. I'm just wondering how you feel about when you see that type of thing. Do you get mad?
Mark, I was sent out to one of the hospitals here in Tucson to do what's called critical incident stress management sessions with any employee of the hospital who felt that they could benefit from crisis intervention services.
Right.
And the majority of people who came in to see my partner and myself happened to be nurses. And they were the ones who verbalized the highest level of anger about having spent, 12 hours a day that past however many months it had been by then, caring for people who had COVID, and then going out to stores or wherever and seeing people without masks.
Yeah,
So they
they're
were
with it all
really
day
having to
long.
grapple.
Yeah, with it all, watching death every day,
Right.
watching their friends die,
Right.
people in the health thing. I mean,
Exactly.
it's such a hard. Sorry, go on.
They also had a large sense of guilt over not being able to do more for the patients who ended up dying.
Yes.
So that's,
They've got it both ways, haven't they?
It's a difficult combination, having anger and guilt together. And, what do you do with that? You really have to be able to process that and take care of yourself. Once again, that's really important, especially for people in the helping field.
Struth, you wonder why the drinking's gone up with all this business going on. You realise that you had a high level of empathy, Caren, at a pretty young age. What age, really? And what brought that out, do you think?
Well, I was 13, and I was in 8th grade. We had a really great school psychologist, Dr. Boyer, who I went to see numerous times over the course of that year because I was fascinated with the field of psychology. I actually had my very first magazine subscription to Psychology Today before I graduated from 8th grade.
Okay.
Not many 13-year-olds can say that.
No, true.
But I also realized in developing a friendship with a woman who I'm still friends with now, that I really wanted to try and help her through her family issues. And I felt that I had that innate ability to actively listen and empathize with her. And I just felt that, yeah, you know what? This is really what I want to do with my life.
I want to ask you a question, Wayne, because I've always wondered about this. You know how in some careers you can't get away from the job.
Right.
Doesn't matter what you do. You try and turn off this and that. Doing what you do, does it affect relationships once you share what you do with people? I mean, do they ever think that while you're befriending them that you might be psychoanalyzing them?
Well, evidently, yes, because on numerous occasions, people have halted for a moment as we meet each other and then jokingly make that kind of remark or that kind of question when they ask, what do you do? Oh, I'm a psychologist.
Oh. Have a lovely day. Well, there's no reason to run from you. You're a friendly fellow. You're timid looking. I mean, nice guy. You'll see his photo up on the site once all this is over and read about him. He's a very, very friendly guy. Bruce Springsteen nut, just like my wife.
That's true.
But also, he's into baseball, aren't you?
Very intensely. Yeah, that goes way back. When I was 13, I was not, unlike Caren, I was not thinking about my future profession, mental health. I was striving, hoping to be the shortstop for the LA Dodgers.
Well, you're an avid baseball fan. Don't you have a huge collection of cards?
I do.
Baseball cards, right?
That is true.
Yeah, but you're a Dodger fan.
I am a Dodger fan. Yes, I've been out here for 30 years, and so I like the Diamondbacks as well, but down deep in my heart, still a Dodger fan, and this seems to be their year, by the way.
Do you remember when Diamondbacks won the World Series?
Sure.
Oh, I sure do.
Yeah.
That was my first experience of live American baseball.
Oh, really?
I was fortunate enough to go to the Bob, as it was then, and I think it was the Bob then.
It was probably.
Was the Bob?
Yeah, ballpark.
And the big unit was pitching.
Oh, yes.
Big Randy.
Yeah.
Man.
Great.
Yeah. But I tell you what, fabulous game. A little bit different to cricket. Played in many countries in pajamas, as we say. But our game, Americans just don't seem to understand how can a game last a week, and take so long in mites. Well, that's the test stuff. But now cricket has become 50 overs a side. Pakistan, India, New Zealand, Australia, they all play off in night games under the lights.
Wow.
In coloured, beautiful outfits. Which is a spectacle.
With large crowds?
With huge crowds.
Huge
packed out, hundreds of thousands. Wow. Unbelievable. Then they go nuts, So that's cricket. So baseball, but baseball's in Australia too. Very popular.
Oh, good.
Baseball's in Australia. What do you think of the cardboard cutouts now that are being used at the baseball game? From a psychological point of view.
Yes, psychologically speaking.
Yes.
Well, I think it's a lot of fun, and I think it's wonderful. I think even more effective for the psychology of the sport, or I should say the psychology of the spectator, since I'm watching a lot of games now that it's back and going, is the background sound. You know, I mean, in other words, the cutout cardboard is fun to see. Lots of smiling faces makes us all kind of smile a little bit. But
Have you seen a ball smack a head yet?
I have. Yes, I have. It is great. You should be awarded some kind of bonus points for that.
Say, you know.
But the background sound that they pipe in, at first I was a little mixed because obviously it's artificial, but it does create a little bit more of the sense of the game to hear when they pipe in the buzz of the crowd to empty stadiums. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea of the sound too. You need that.
Well, I think you do.
Yeah,
It'd be very different to hear it just. I mean, you know, we could do it, but very different to just hear it totally silent versus.
Oh, yeah, it's affected sport. I tell you what. This is Tucson Means Business, and it's on TucsonBusinessRadioX.com. Of course, we're on different podcast platforms all across online and across the globe and so on. And we're proudly sponsored by the 49ers Golf and Country Club. And we'll be right back. You're listening to Tucson Means Business on Tucson Business Radio X right here, coming out of the Stewart Title building on Broadway. And of course, we're proudly sponsored by the 49ers Golf and Country Club, a wonderful course and wonderful club here in Tucson. I have the Director of Memberships and Tournaments, Casey Polivchak. Casey, tournaments are a big thing for a golf club.
Absolutely. We are a semi-private club, which means we have membership available, but we also are open to the public. With being open to the public, we welcome nonprofit tournaments, fundraisers. We specialize in groups from 4 to 144.
See, this is an important thing, isn't it, in the community? Companies would love to do something for their staff, something that's different, but they don't want the course to be too hard, and they want it to be friendly. They want the service to be right, and the atmosphere to make it a really fun day.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
And that's what you strive to do, isn't it? It's part of your whole job, really.
I think that's what we specialize in is the... How am I going to say this? The tournament that's not looking at spending too much money because they're in it to make money for their charity.
Right.
So we offer really good facilities, a great golf course. But I'm going to be honest, it's not the best golf course in Tucson. It's not the nicest facilities, but everything is good out there, and your guests are going to have a good experience because of the value that they're getting for the cost of the tournament.
There you go. That's an important factor. It's all very well, wanting to have a great day out for everybody, but if it breaks the bank, then it defeats the whole purpose.
Absolutely.
And if you're trying to raise funds, which is an integral part, because Tucson seems to be a wonderful place for raising funds, there's so many people who support so many wonderful causes.
Mm-hmm. And there is a lot of, great causes out there. And, people they kind of come to a fork in the road. You got school sponsorships that, booster clubs. There's so many fundraising possibilities out there that we really have specialized in golf tournaments for people and helping them maximize the amount of money they can make. Mm-hmm. I've put together a brochure to help people that have never run a golf tournament that will kind of take them from step one until the day of the event.
That's very, very good. If people from somewhere now, maybe they're moving into Tucson with a new business, new company, whatever, how can they get hold of you directly?
They can call me directly at 520-749-4925. Extension's 212, but we recommend you go to the website. It's a great way to get information about the club on not only golf tournaments but membership. That website is 49ercc.com, FORTYNINERCC.com.
There you go. Casey Polivchak. He's the Director of Memberships and Tournaments. He's the fellow to speak to. Now back to the show. So welcome back, and I'm speaking with Wayne Satten and with Caren Jablonsky, both in the health and helpful field of caring about people. Caren, you work for a health home, which
Yes.
provides crisis mobile team services, as well as ongoing behavioral health services. And this includes, I understand, a community reentry program for people who have been incarcerated. Can you share that with us and what's involved with that?
Yes, we do provide services for people who have recently been released from both prison and jail. We help them get housing and employment and ongoing therapy services if needed. And it's a really effective program for people who might not have the support of friends or family in the community.
Coming out of incarceration.
Yes.
I know. I worked on a project last year. I was sort of very disappointed in this. I thought, that nobody was really... Well, there are organizations. I can't say nobody. There are organizations that are doing things. I was trying to do something with reference to those out on parole and those who have come out of jail after doing their term and so on. And I learned so much about the fact that often they've burnt families, they've burnt friends, they've got nowhere to go, nowhere to stay. No one will employ them because they're untrustworthy. 2 out of 3 will reoffend. It makes you think, what's the use? Funny enough, I heard this morning that in Scotland, they're starting a reality television show. It's like Talent from Inside. And they're all incarcerated felons.
Wow.
And I bet you there's some nice singers in there too. Guitarists, piano player, God, no, harps maybe. But seriously, why not? This is another topic, but to me, there's so much talent that is wasted in jail.
Oh, look at Johnny Cash.
Merle Haggard.
And so many others that maybe didn't do enough that warranted being put in jail for years, or have paid their time and just want to go straight, just want to get out and be, human again and part of society and accepted. But they've got these hurdles in front of them. I wanted to ask you what you thought of just the idea of this, because I don't normally touch onto politics, but this thing about with the, Bloomberg paying for the felons to vote, just an opinion on that. Do you think how would they react to that, the people that are incarcerated in a case like that?
I don't have much of a good thought about, how those, I'm sure that they would welcome that opportunity to have somebody else help pay, I guess. I don't know a lot about it. Pays the fines, the fees, the rest that have to be paid off in order for them to be able to regain their voting rights. Right.
But that's really the key I'm getting at, the right to vote. Okay. And having that voting right again, does it make me feel like somebody again?
I would hope so. I would hope so. I would hope having, if the aim is to have people who have been incarcerated to come out with a second chance to truly lead a decent and civil life, be a citizen again, that's crucial for the right to vote again. If that's denied with no opportunity to regain it, I think that that would be quite alienating. It's a message to them that they're not really a part of our society.
Yeah, very good, psychologist. Very good. This guy's good. I might go to him. Do you charge a lot? Oh, the first one's free. Thank you very much. Oh, good. Let me ask you this then. In your practice, because you're not going to give names away or anything else, but do you have ex-felons that you would have as clients? Or have you had in the past?
Not many. I try to think. I'd have to really search. If it's happened fewer than a handful of times in my long career. So I don't have. I imagine there are colleagues who perhaps have established themselves as particularly skilled to help people who have gone through whatever they've gone through, the hurt and the difficulties and the mistakes before they were in prison, and then being in prison probably is typically pretty traumatizing.
Yes, I was going to say, it would take a bit more, wouldn't it?
So I can't think of a person offhand, and I would wonder if there are colleagues who are especially skilled at trying to help in that reentry that you guys were talking about.
Let's talk about your database then, across the board. Is there more executives, men than women, more younger than middle age or older? Is there a specific categorization of your client base in today's whole gestalt that we're going through?
Yeah, I do see, unlike even though I said I haven't seen many ex-felons or people coming out of prison, but I have seen just a wide variety of folks, age-wise, ethnically, in our community. Rich and poor. I've done a lot of work with people who are very well-established engineers, especially at Raytheon here in town. So I've worked with clients who economically are quite comfortable, and I've certainly worked with many clients who are having a difficult time getting by. So a pretty wide variety in many ways. I haven't specialized in, I don't know.
What's the biggest complaint? I mean, you brought up Raytheon. I'm surprised you even brought the name up, but you're sort of like were you like a psychologist to the company?
No. Just that Raytheon, is a large employer here in town, and that's just an example of where...
Well, it's 10,000 odd or something, isn't it?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Huge, yeah,
Right.
10,000.
Right.
So there might be one or two out of them that might need a bit of help occasionally.
Well, probably even a few more than that, who have gone through just the struggles. I mean, I guess really we're talking about the
Stressful jobs or what?
all the stressors, Mark, that you and Caren and I, face in the different aspects of life. So in relationships or the stressors on the job or problems, various kinds of issues that come up for any of us, as human beings. And it hits all socioeconomic strata. So, people come in primarily complaining of some degree of depression and or anxiety. And even, those two often melt into the other. But various types of depression or anxiety are the main complaint. Sometimes people who have been struggling with it for years and years and years. And others for whom it's come up just recently, in recent months or in recent years. So it's really been quite a variety of people that I work with. What's
the difference between a clinical psychologist and a psychiatrist?
Well, the main difference is one of somewhat different training, and then most people would say that the main thing is that psychiatrists can prescribe medications and psychologists do not yet. Actually, there's a movement. It's been going on for probably 15 or so years for psychologists to gain prescription privileges, and in a few states in the country,
Has they really?
They do.
And why is that?
Why
do you need then to be able to prescribe? Well, I guess you need to be able to do your job more.
Well, that's all a very interesting issue about psychologists and prescription privileges. Back to the issue of just psychiatrists versus psychologists. Psychiatrists after college went to 4 years of medical school, and then on to a few more years of psychiatric training, where they can prescribe medication. Myself, as a psychologist after college, I went to 5 years of graduate school, not medical school, graduate school in psychology, and then graduated with my doctoral degree in psychology. And I can't prescribe. The issue of why it might be valuable or why would psychologists want to do it, first of all, that is variable. I have wavered in my personal interest about whether I would want to do that or not. I think but the main idea behind it would be there is a great need for people to be evaluated for medication, and in some ways there are not enough psychiatrists to go around.
Right.
So there is a market, I think, for psychologists.
But then you hear about how there's too much prescribing.
Prescribing,
it's
yes.
It's like the other end of the scale.
That is the other end,
but
and I am sympathetic to that, frankly.
Right.
I'm a psychologist who believes that somehow our culture in America over the last 20, 25 years, 30 years has gotten into prescribing meds too readily. I think we prescribe psychiatric medication far more than other countries, even in Western Europe. So it is interesting. But nevertheless, we are used to in this country being evaluated for the possible benefit of psychiatric medication. And for that purpose, there aren't enough psychiatrists really to fully go around. So there probably could be, more prescribers could come into the field and find patients, who need them.
I grew up watching American content on television.
Yeah.
Before we could build our own in Australia. But you go back into the 70s, 80s, it was a norm thing to have a psychiatrist.
Yes.
It was a norm thing to be able to have someone to go and chat and jokes on the couch, jokes with this.
Smoking? You certainly both were smoking, during a therapy session.
Unbelievable. How do you find that today? Is it still okay, or is it still a bit of a you don't want anybody to know? Or
You mean people's attitudes toward being in therapy?
Yeah.
Oh, I think we have come a long way. I mean, you're right. Even though there was a part of our culture in America, I think going back to the 60s, the 70s, where everybody, but I think actually the stigma of getting mental health care has lessened over the years, I'd say. Overall, I do think that the stigma has lessened, and thankfully, more people are comfortable to reach out and get, counseling or psychotherapy help. Yeah.
You're listening to Wayne Satten, who is a private practitioner, has his own therapy practice here in Tucson. You don't have to go to Phoenix. He's right here in Tucson. You can look him up in the book. He has a great Facebook page and all of that. You can find him. Maybe if you see him out on the road on his bike, you get 10 points if you get him. Caren, I want to ask you, you're a little different in your approach in that you combined your love of psychology with nutrition.
Yes.
And you've assisted people in working through mental health issues to forge a healthier way of eating. Surely that is not easy.
Well, my passion for nutrition goes back even further than psychology.
Before 13?
I became enamored with healthy eating when I was only 12.
Oh, my God.
Yes. And I have combined the two loves, and my business is Mind Over Menu. I have historically helped friends and family members become healthier and lose weight.
Okay, how do you do that? I mean, there's that much stuff on the market today, right?
Yes.
If you were to say to somebody, let's say you're at a private party or something and someone asked what you do, and then you got into chatting what you do in nutrition, and they said to you, look, I've tried all sorts of things. Do you sort of look for what their complaint is, what they're suffering from? It's not just a one cut-out thing for everybody, is it, when you come to nutrition, right?
Exactly. Because there's what I would consider to be a lot of the time core issues that people have. And overeating is one of the symptoms of somebody's core issue, which could go back to unresolved childhood trauma, let's say. And in order...
Or misery, or depression.
Exactly.
Or scared of the pandemic.
Any of the aforementioned. Anxiety and depression, like Wayne pointed out, kind of almost go hand in hand. When I see people out in the community, those are the two major issues that I hear about: depression and anxiety. And a lot of people who are established with what's called a health home are already on several prescription medications. And a lot of the time, they're medicating with unhealthy food. Now, when somebody eats unhealthy food, a lot of the time that can actually cause anxiety if they're eating food that's high in sugar, let's say.
Yeah, but
and a lot of people don't realize.
The chemicals too, right? It's the chemicals that they put into the darn food, right?
Exactly.
It reacts on people.
A lot of people have reactions to white flour.
Yeah,
and
that's
they're
one.
not even aware
Right.
that it can be affecting them.
So what should these people do? What's the first thing they should do, do you think?
Well, awareness is the first step in change. So to become more aware of what's causing the overeating or unhealthy eating is a really good first step. And a lot of the time, that's where someone like Wayne would come in with ongoing therapy. Because when I'm seeing someone out in the community, it's a very small snapshot of what's
Right.
going on in their life. In fact, we try to just kind of zoom in on the last 24 hours of what's been happening.
It's almost you've got to live with them for 6 months to get a true picture, right?
Exactly.
A lot of times that's true, yeah.
And
Right.
there's no way you can do that.
Right. And I think, in some regard, that's what people think we're there for. Like, a very quick therapy session, but it's more crisis services. So what we're aiming to do is facilitate the ongoing services that are needed, whether that be medication or ongoing therapy, or if somebody is in a much more acute state, then we would transport that person
Right.
to a higher level of care.
You know what I wish was out there? Because I really do understand the importance of eating correctly, of what the chemicals in food can do to your body and your makeup and your psyche. Too much sugar, not enough sugar, this and that. I quit sugar many, many years ago, but then I'd have something else. But it's when you need that snack during the day and you don't know what healthy thing to get. Or it's going to taste as good as getting a donut, or it's going to taste as good as getting a chocolate bar or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think if people could go for more of those, I think there's going to be a big market of more of the health foods, real health foods.
Yes.
Snacks, you know? What do you do? I mean, you don't just go for an apple all the time or a
You know
carrot.
what, Mark? I was just going to tell you about a variety of apple that I got turned on to recently called Sweet Tango. And
So where is it
I
done?
happened to buy a bag of organic Sweet Tango apples at Whole Foods a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah?
And I think I was
Sweet
saying to
Tango.
Wayne, this is the best apple I've ever tasted.
Really?
I bit into it, and it was the crunchiest, juiciest apple. It was
Nothing like a juicy
amazing.
apple. I love that.
You walked into that one, Mark. You can't
So
always
that's
have
a
an
really
apple.
good idea.
Yeah.
An apple is always going to be a really good
See,
option.
I fell in love with pistachios. Never had them in my life. I used to eat peanuts.
That was my first favorite nut.
Absolutely love it. Mind you, I'm sick of how they're getting less and less in the packet and more air in there.
Yeah.
And they're going up in price. But my wife tells me they're very fattening. So that's terribly discouraging because I couldn't put them down.
Well, in moderation, nuts are actually really good for you because they have healthy fats.
Almonds, yes.
Almonds, walnuts, pistachios.
Yeah. So, all right. How did you first know? Well, we sort of touched on that. It was 13 and you just knew you wanted to go into the mental health field and help people. What schooling did you end up doing though? What did you do to receive, that you had to receive to be able to go and do the work that you're doing now?
My bachelor's in psychology through the university here in Tucson,
That's one.
U Arizona. I've also done extensive training in trauma-informed care, and I do have the certification in health coaching.
Very good.
So that's how I'm able to combine the two fields.
Well, I would not imagine for a minute that your chosen career is easy and it's all hunky-dory. What keeps you motivated to remain in the field?
Knowing that I'm helping people. It's for me, it is as simple as that. I love the connection that I make with people. And I've been doing this job now for 5 years, as of yesterday, as a matter of fact.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so in those 5 years, if I added up all of the people that I have been able to interact with, it has to be in the thousands at this point.
Certainly not cliche for you. I love helping people. It's a real deal, huh?
Yes.
Because it takes a special soul, I think, Wayne, to be able to do this work.
I think that's, very true. It certainly takes, I think it takes a person who is, as Caren highlights, empathic and compassionate and curious. I think what helps me stay in the field and stay kind of enlivened is a continued interest and curiosity in one another's stories. I don't really tend to view myself as the doctor versus the patient, although that's one way of describing it, and certainly not necessarily the expert about life versus helping those who are not expert.
Right.
But it's the dialogue of continuing to be curious about what people go through and how they're trying to recover from difficult times and carry forward toward a more fulfilling future. And that's not anything different than what I'm trying to do.
I read once that one of the highest professions of jumping out of windows is psychiatrists and all the rest of it. Is that a myth?
I believe, I think I've heard those studies too over the years, and so I believe that may well be true. I don't know. I don't experience it that way in my career here in the community.
I mean, why would it be if it was? Do they take on a piece of somebody all the time? Is that what it is?
I think that it is that. I think it's taking on the difficult stories that we listen to and we try to help with and empathize with. And I also think what can make it very difficult, and this is the tricky part about being in the helping professions of any sort, which is exactly what level of expectation or responsibility we take for somebody necessarily getting a lot better, because that's always an uncertain prospect. It's an uncertain prospect about exactly how well somebody's going to respond to, call it treatment, I call it therapy. And I think it's hard for us to want to help others to do better, and yet not everybody will improve.
I think there has to be some sort of satisfaction that you need to see and receive that you've done well?
Often enough.
Often
enough,
and
because it doesn't happen with every single individual, right?
No, but
So
it
often
must be
enough.
like a thrill for you to see somebody really heal.
Absolutely, it is. It is. In that respect, it comes to my mind like being like a teacher. Many teachers obviously are there to help their students and help their students learn and take off, and many see it. Many teachers do not. Just like for me as a psychologist, I don't always know what kind of positive impact I may have made. And then sometimes I have the fortune of having clients return for a little bit more work that they want to do and commenting about how helpful it had been. And I don't always see that.
No, that's nice. That's nice to know.
So it is nice.
Well, you must be pretty non-threatening with your clients. They've got to be able to feel relaxed with you, I would imagine.
I would very
to be
much.
able to open up
Right.
and trust you.
Right.
Capital T.
Absolutely.
What changes have you seen within our community then that relate to the pandemic? What's the most prolific thing you've seen?
Well, related to the pandemic, I think that, again, all of us are experiencing a greater level of anxiety or unrest with what's going on. Not all equally. I didn't coin this, but I think it's very true, as somebody said this toward the beginning of this pandemic, that we may all be encountering the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. And I realize that. It gives me pause to be thankful for circumstances that I have, and for many people to know that they are that others have it far more difficult, with far greater difficulty.
Would you advise them, would you say right here and now, look, go see somebody. Don't hold it in. Go and chat. Go and see somebody.
I would absolutely encourage people to do that, or at least to not feel that there has to be any hard and high barrier to doing that. Again, you were asking earlier about any negative attitudes or stigma about getting mental health help. I think that has gone down over the many years, but I would always be supportive of people not taking to heart, not taking seriously a stigma as if it's a bad thing to reach out. I often tell my clients over the many years, it takes strength and courage to be willing to reach out for a resource rather than feeling like you have to tough it out alone or you're not allowed to reach out for a resource.
So what's the best way for a new patient to start a relationship with any clinical psychologist?
Well, it's a artifact of our American mental health system that we have insurance of different sorts, and so we often have to check and see, or we often choose to check and see what clinicians out there, what psychologists take, what types of insurance people have, whether they're on Medicare or whether they have Magellan or United Behavioral Health or the different insurance companies that are out there. But then beyond seeing who might be in your panel, you reach out, whether it's just to see how you feel in front of with that therapist. You talked about trust with a capital T. So a lot of times people may have a session or two with a therapist and see if they feel a great degree of comfort and safety and trust and support. If not, I think people should feel quite okay about reaching out to somebody else, because you do need to feel that trustworthy relationship. That is crucial.
Do you get singles a lot or couples as well?
Some couples. I definitely work with some couples, but by far and away, the huge majority of my practice is working on individual therapy with teens and primarily adults.
And Caren Jablonsky, what would you have done differently, if anything, years ago with regard to your occupation?
Nothing that I can think of right now. Oh, I would have been an actress. That's it.
You might have had to wait some tables, all that sort of jazz.
That's why psychodrama was.
Psychodrama, there you go.
I do love psychodrama.
I mean, it's not an easy game. Does the industry lose staffing all the time? I mean, it must be a toll on lifestyle and psyche. What do you do? I mean, what do you do to prevent burnout?
I hike Tumamock Hill. That has been my go-to over the past year. Since January, my goal has been to get up there 100 times. I'm at number 60. Well, I'm going on 64 tomorrow morning.
All right.
So
good luck.
Closing in. Yes.
How can people get help quickly if they need someone to talk to? Caren, from your perspective.
I am very glad you asked that, Mark, because no matter where someone is in Pima County, all someone has to do is reach out and call 520-622-6000, and they will be connected with the crisis line, and that dispatcher will dispatch a crisis team 24 hours a day. It does not matter if someone has insurance or where they are. They can the person can be standing in front of a Circle K. The crisis team will show up in usually a nice white Versa and conduct a crisis assessment and then facilitate ongoing services for the person. So it's really important for people out here in the community to know that there is that free crisis mobile team service, and a lot of people don't know that.
Well, remind me, we've got to get those numbers up on the site, okay?
Yes.
On your bio, if you don't mind. Like, it's not
Right.
like they're calling you direct or anything. It's
this
just
is-
the public number.
This is
and, they can go to
a
that.
crisis line
Yeah.
dispatch that they'll be connected to.
You do great work. I mean, Wayne, my sort of feeling is, what would we do without them? You know.
Absolutely. I mean, I would want to highlight in terms of the work that Caren does in the agency in town that, we're facing all kinds of societal questioning and unrest about the role of the police and how the police interact with the community. And there's lots of important mention about the need for police and law enforcement to have the aid of social support services like what Caren does here in Pima County. I imagine that her agency and that service is underfunded, as it often is in many communities, but at least we have that kind of service where sometimes she accompanies police to deal with issues that are more
Really?
mental health and social service oriented, a crisis in that area rather than a law enforcement issue.
The stories you could tell, eh, Caren?
Yeah.
Yes.
That is true. Amazing stories.
Maybe a book one day, huh?
Exactly.
Wayne, what would you say is the best form of therapy?
Do you mean like theoretical orientation or what?
In layman's terms, please.
Okay. All right. Well, the best form, in my mind, of therapy is an individual finding that therapist with whom they can establish a comfortable, supportive, and trustworthy relationship. That's when good therapy is done. At first, I was going to get tripped up on your question by talking about the different schools of therapy. Which is the best? Is it psychoanalytic? Is it cognitive behavioral? Is it Gestalt?
No.
The research
I
has...
wouldn't know that. I wouldn't have a clue.
Yeah, well, you're right.
You answered it
Right.
beautifully and perfectly.
Right, because the research would indicate research has been done, and at least the research that convinces me or affects me is the research that shows that whatever your school of training was in these different theories, it is ultimately the therapeutic relationship, the relationship that the individual establishes with that therapist where they feel safe to open up and self-examine and hear feedback to consider. That's where good therapy happens. And that's why, even if I can be a part of it, and I hope that I can be a helpful part of it, when people improve, the bulk of the responsibility, the bulk of the credit for their improvement belongs to them, not to me. I hope I have a role because apparently a professional and being paid for what I do, but I do know that when people improve and make a wonderful progress, that I'm happy to see the bulk of the responsibility and credit belongs to them.
Well, I know you care. And a quick plug, what's the easiest way for people to find you?
Well, you can find me, I'm sure, online, but 733-2425. I believe that's...
Well, we'll get that down.
Yeah, you'll get that down because I hardly ever call myself.
Because people don't remember.
Yeah,
numbers.
my name
They're
again.
either driving or doing
right,
something.
Right.
But okay, so Wayne Satten,
Right.
Private psychologist, runs a therapy practice right here in Tucson. Has done for many years. Very good at what he does. And I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your very busy day to come on Tucson Means Business. It's been wonderful having you. You've given us a different side of things that has made me think a little. It's very good.
Good. A nice conversation. Nice chance to chat.
And Caren Jablonsky, crisis mobile team first responder for a mental health agency here in Tucson and many other things. A wonderful job. Thanks for the work you do in the community, Caren.
Well, thank you, Mark.
Keep
for
up your
taking
good
this
work.
Opportunity to
It's lovely to have you.
to
Very
do the
good.
interview.
There we go for today on Tucson Means Business, proudly brought to us by the 49ers Golf and Country Club, an institution that's the hidden jewel of the desert out there on Tanque Verde, past the Emily Gray School on the right-hand side. Reseating, beautiful green at the moment, and the restaurant will be opening again soon, and everything will be there, so support them, won't you? And, of course, we're broadcasting live from the studios of Stewart Title here at the Stewart Title corporate offices on Broadway, is where the studio is for Tucson Business RadioX. I'm your host, Mark Bishop. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you soon.